Today I want to talk about annual performance reviews. It's this thing that most veterinary hospitals, but not all, actually do to be able to rank their employees' actual annual performance. It typically occurs just once a year, in which the employee sits down with their manager and supervisor and goes through what is their greatest accomplishments over the last year and what are things that they need to improve upon. Let me talk to you about from the employee standpoint, and then as you, the employer, if you happen to be a manager or supervisor. From the employee standpoint, these suck. There's no sugarcoating it. Unfortunately, most veterinary hospitals only sit down to do development coaching conversation once a year. Do we think that's sufficient? The answer is no. It was rhetorical, guys. The answer is definitely no. The other reality is that you're not going to be able to actually perform a review of the entire year. Most employers who sit down and fill out these annual reviews, it turns out it's just a snapshot in time. It's whatever the employee did in the last maybe month or two. That's all we can really remember. Do we really think we're going to be able to go through the whole year? Absolutely not. So I hate when they're called annual performance reviews, as if you're going to do a deep dive from 364 days ago until now and come up with exactly what the employee did great and what the employee needs to improve upon. The other struggle for employees is that you sit down and they are usually largely negative. There are direct correlations to employees becoming demotivated after walking out of a negative performance review. That seems to make sense, right? They tend to be verbal vomits of everything you ever did wrong, and we just didn't tell you because we were busy, and here's everything your actual coworkers think of you, the doctors think of you, the nurses think of you, the technicians think of you, the owner thinks of you, and now you got to go fix those things. It's overwhelming. I once talked to a veterinary technician who was pretty upset because she came out of her annual performance review and said that she had a list of about 20 things she needed to improve upon. One was her math skills, anesthesia skills, restraint, and there were some technical other skills thrown in there. But then it was she showed up late about 3 times. People thought she was negative. She gossiped a lot. She didn't get along with a particular employee. A certain doctor didn't like her. And by the end of the actual review, she was so overwhelmed, she didn't even know why she was still employed there and why they hadn't fired her. Asking a good question. We can't do that to our employees. So from an employee standpoint, first and foremost, make sure that your boss, your manager, your supervisor actually is having development coaching conversations with you. I think a lot of times there's a lot of fear and trepidation. I don't want to know how I'm doing, but you should want to know how you're doing. Every single one of us, including me, can improve upon something. And unless our manager or our boss sits down and has these constructive criticism coaching conversations, we simply don't know. We often think that soft skills, you either have them or you don't, but that's not true. You can learn soft skills. You can learn how to deal with conflict resolution. You can learn better communication skills. You can learn different tactics for dealing with certain things. Unless somebody actually takes the time to coach you, you don't get to learn any of that stuff. And instead, again, it's just verbally vomited on you on the annual performance review. So as an employee, you should ask for how you are doing at least once a quarter. Yeah, guys, once a quarter. Your employer, your boss, your manager should want to sit down with you and have a coaching conversation. Develop out some career goals for you. What do you want to aspire to? What do you want to learn? And they should help you get there. And I know a lot of you are laughing right now because that doesn't happen. Hey, I get it. I was once in a hospital for over 6 years, and I actually asked for actual coaching and to be met with, and I didn't even do an annual review. They simply just ignored me and would say, oh, you're doing fine. No, I'm not doing fine. I want to know how I'm doing and what can I improve upon. So this is really important for all employees to ask for. The second thing is if you're the employer. Are you a boss or a manager or a supervisor or a leader of any capacity that's handing out these horrible annual performance reviews? Let me be very clear. You're probably not doing it right. And I'm going to be doing a podcast next week, so I encourage you to go ahead and listen on that podcast where I'm going to challenge you to think about your archaic ways that you're currently doing annual performance reviews. Shake it up a little bit. We're going to bring in some data and science, and hopefully you can reshape the way that you're doing it. Now, there's an entire chapter devoted to this, and I am going to plug it in my new book called Oops, My Team is Toxic. So if you're interested in a way or a variety of different ways of actually doing development plans instead of just performance reviews, How about we actually figure out how to develop and coach our employees? And there's an entire I think it's 2 chapters dedicated to it. So certainly look into that and take a look at that. It's titled, the actual title of the chapter is Performance Reviews Are the Devil. Now, if that doesn't make you want to read that chapter, I don't know what will. So anyway, coaching individuals is a skill set. So I encourage you to figure out a way to develop and coach your employees. And you're definitely probably not meeting with them at least once a quarter. I would prefer you to meet with them even more frequently. Yeah, that's important. If you are doing annual performance reviews, I want you to think about the way that you're doing it, how you're collecting the data. Is it fair and equal to everyone? Are you really doing an entire annual review, or is it just that snapshot in time? Can you use a rubric system, which is a point scale system, actually go ahead and measure someone's performance? What are the competencies in which you think are important for that person to be successful in that role? How are you reviewing them is really important. And then the last and final piece I'm going to challenge is many of you go into these conversations with your employee and you already have a preconceived notion. You've already figured out how much you're going to increase their salary by. So after an hour, you say to them, here's everything you need to improve upon. Here's what you're doing great. And here's your new salary. I'm sorry, but I'm going to challenge you and say, why are we giving out salaries once a year, only once a year? And why are we tying to this one performance review? Why are we tying a whole thing to this one performance review? The employee doesn't even get a say in their salary. Even if they disagreed with your review, it doesn't matter because you already figured out how much they're going to get paid. You already put a value on their worth before speaking to them. And that doesn't feel good to an employee that you haven't bothered to coach or actually talk to throughout the most of the year. So I'm going to leave that here. This is obviously a very loaded vlog that I'm talking about because there's many different ways to be able to do development plans, but I want to challenge every single one of you. If you are an employee, you should demand your boss does right by you by coming up with a true development plan in which they meet multiple times a year. If you are in a leadership position, I want you to shake things up. Figure out if you're doing that archaic once a year annual performance review and start thinking, how do we actually measure success? How do we fairly judge people? And why am I only doing it once a year? Yeah, good questions, guys. Anyway, check out my podcast. It's going to be here. I'm going to drop it next week to hopefully give you guys even more ideas. Or just buy the book and read the chapter. The Performance Reviews Are the Devil. Thanks, guys.